Your brain can turn any silence into the loudest noise you've ever heard. And therein lies the key to what truly holds you back. Let's analyze why this happens and how to stop it. When everything finally goes quiet, no notifications, no conversations, no background noise, it should get easier. But instead, something inside begins to weigh down. Not from the outside, but from within. As if silence is not a break, but an exam you weren't prepared for. And here the familiar scenario kicks in. Your hand reaches for the phone. Music or a podcast is turned on. An urgent matter is found that didn't exist 5 minutes ago. Anything at all, just not to be alone with yourself for too long. This is not weakness or laziness, it's a signal. Somewhere inside, there's something you haven't dared to think about aloud. The most uncomfortable part is that the longer you postpone facing this, the louder it becomes. Silence doesn't disappear, it accumulates. And at some point, it begins to weigh heavier than any external noise, because you can't hide from it with headphones. We live in an era where external noise has become the norm. An endless stream of content, notifications every few minutes, constant engagement. All this creates the perfect conditions for never stopping. And that's why most people carry things within them for years that they have never personally confronted. Not because they don't want to sort it out, but because the system around them is designed in such a way that you need to deliberately create space for it. And that is unfamiliar and initially uncomfortable. This video is about what happens when you finally stop. It's not about meditation or breathing techniques. It's about the specific mechanism, why the inner voice gets louder precisely when it's quiet around, and what actually lies behind this discomfort. We will analyze how the habit of avoidance is structured and why it works against you, and then we'll move on to practice. What exactly to do at the moment when the pressure from within becomes unbearable. There is one thesis that changes everything about the perception of this topic. What you're running from does not become less simply because you're not looking at it. It just starts to control you from the blind spot, through reactions that seem automatic, through decisions that are made as if by themselves, through fatigue without an apparent cause. Realizing this is already the first step toward regaining control. Before moving on, remember, have you ever had something you ran away from for a long time, and when you finally faced it, it turned out to be not as scary as you expected? Write about it in the comments. Such stories help us choose topics that you really need in the upcoming episodes. There is a common belief that seems logical. If you don't think about something troubling, it's as if it doesn't exist. Out of sight, out of life. But the psyche works just the opposite. What you deliberately ignore does not disappear. It continues to consume resources, in the background, constantly, like an application running in the background draining the battery while the screen is off. This is why people who try not to think about something painful often feel tired for no apparent reason. Not from work, from holding on. The mechanism here is specific. When the brain detects something unfinished, a conflict, a question, a fear, an unmade decision, it does not archive it. It keeps it in active memory, periodically checking. Is it still relevant? Does it still need to be resolved? The longer there's no answer, the higher the priority of the signal. This is not a weakness of character. This is literally how the system for processing unresolved situations in the mind works. And every time you evade that signal, switch to your phone, drown it out with music, load yourself with tasks, the brain registers, avoidance worked, the tension temporarily subsided. Thus, the next time, a stronger stimulus is needed to evade again. The threshold for discomfort is lowered. Silence begins to feel unbearable within just a few seconds, not minutes. This is the rule of reverse reinforcement. Avoidance does not lessen the internal signal, it calibrates it upward. Every escape tells the system, this signal is threatening enough to run away. Therefore, the next time it will be perceived as even more threatening. You are not hiding from the demon. You are training yourself to fear it more and more, never encountering it. A typical trap here is confusing relief with resolution. You get distracted, feel better. It seems you've coped. But the relief from avoidance and the relief from clarity are physically different states. The first is a release of tension in the shoulders and chest for a few hours. The second is when something inside literally releases and you notice that you've stopped automatically returning to this topic. The difference is not in intensity, but in duration and in what remains afterwards. After avoidance, a light background heaviness lingers. After engagement, an emptiness that over time fills with something else. Here's what happens to a person who has long carried within themselves one unresolved question. Not catastrophic, just important. Should they stay where they are now, or is something supposed to change? They do not ignore it deliberately. Each time the question arises, they load themselves with something else. A month passes, 3, 6 months, and at some point, they notice that they are reacting irritably to things that used to not bother them. That they wake up in the morning with a feeling of constriction in the throat, even though the day hasn't yet started. That they have started to make small decisions somewhat mechanically, without interest. They do not connect this with that question, but it is this question that draws resources, silently, steadily, every day. It's important to refute another false belief here, one that is more subtle than the first. Many think that facing what they're running from will make it more real and thus more painful, as if while you're not looking, there's a chance it will resolve itself. But this only works with physical objects. Psychologically, it's the opposite. The unspoken is scarier than the spoken. Vague anxiety weighs more than a specific fear because a specific fear can be assessed, while vague anxiety cannot. When you finally look at what has accumulated, you almost always discover that it has a shape, and anything that has a shape can already be measured. And what can be measured stops seeming limitless. There is a precise inner moment that many recognize. You sit alone, it's quiet around, and suddenly something rises from within. Not a thought, but a feeling. Something like, I need to think about this, and almost immediately, an impulse to switch. This gap between the feeling and the escape, a fraction of a second, is the point at which everything is resolved. Not in lengthy self-analysis sessions, it is right here. Because the brain that has learned to escape in this fraction of a second eventually stops even noticing that it is escaping. It becomes automatic. The model that helps stop this is called 2-second window. It's not a technique from the therapist's arsenal, just an accurate description of how a pause works. When discomfort rises and your hand reaches for distraction, intentionally give yourself 2 seconds before acting. Don't try to solve the problem or realize something in those 2 seconds. Just acknowledge. What has risen right now? A heaviness in the chest? An anxious thought? An image of a situation? That's enough. You haven't run away. You've seen. And what has been seen at least once already loses a bit of power, because it no longer operates from complete darkness. The demons that are talked about as something destructive, upon closer examination, almost always turn out to be signals that have long awaited attention. Not monsters, requests. Not threats, unresolved questions that have become louder precisely because they have been ignored for too long. And when you finally look at them, they do not attack. They simply stop screaming. Right now, while this video is playing, do one simple action. Close your eyes for 60 seconds and ask yourself, without trying to answer, what exactly have I been avoiding thinking about for the past few weeks? Don't look for an answer, just let the question linger inside. If something came up, remember that feeling. That is the entry point. What a person is running from almost never looks like a big problem. More often, it's something specific and uncomfortable, a conversation that has long been postponed, a decision that has been hanging unanswered for 3 months, or a realization that you have almost formulated, but each time you stop halfway. It is at this moment, when the thought is almost formed, that the hand reaches for the phone, not because of laziness, because the brain has registered a threat and issued the usual escape. The main principle here is not to process everything at once. It is to give it a name. Imagine a person who has been avoiding a conversation with a colleague after a conflict for 3 weeks. Not because they didn't want to resolve it, because each time the thought came up, they found something more urgent. One day, they simply wrote down one sentence in their notes. I was hurt that I wasn't asked. Not a plan, not a dialogue, just one sentence. And the tension shifted, not vanished, but shifted, because the nameless became specific. Do the same today. Take what came up in those 60 seconds and write it down in one sentence, without explanations and without solutions. Just name what it is. That is enough as a first step. How to embed this in the chaos? Imagine a regular meeting. You are sitting, listening, and suddenly the heaviness rises within. Don't panic and don't try to think it through. Place your hand on your knee and feel the pressure of your palm, physically, specifically. Hold that feeling for 5 seconds. The chest slightly tightens, breathing slightly pauses. You notice it, don't run away. No one around sees anything. But you just didn't let the autopilot win. That is enough. There is one thing that this video wanted to say honestly. What pressures from within does not become more dangerous just because you look at it. It becomes more dangerous precisely when you continue to pretend it doesn't exist. Not because it grows, but because you give it control without naming it. The longer something remains in the blind spot, the more it influences decisions, reactions, and self-perception. Silently, in the background, steadily. This is not a metaphor. It is literally how the psyche works with unresolved signals. And the flip side of this mechanism is also specific. One honest sentence written today already changes how that signal will sound tomorrow morning. You don't need to tackle everything at once. You need to stop pretending that silence doesn't tell you anything important, because it does. And the sooner you start listening, the less effort it will take to drown it out. Tomorrow morning, before you open your phone, give yourself 1 minute of silence and just ask yourself, what is the loudest right now? Not to solve it, to hear it. This is the beginning. If this video was helpful to you, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.